This is Lawyers, Guns and Money. It's the Thaiger, and to address your legal interests and concerns, we have Ben Hart, better known as Benjamin Hart, all the way from Integrity Legal. As usual, there's a link in the description. And by the way, Ben, got a whole playlist there called Lawyers, Guns and Money, and there's plenty of different topics that we've addressed. Today, we're going to be addressing some maybe false assumptions that foreigners have about Thai law.
Right.
Pretty much just ignorance of the way that Thailand sort of works a bit differently. Got some big ones to address. I'm going to throw one at you. So I'm a foreigner and I've got a Thai wife or a Thai partner, married or not, and I put down the money to pay for the land that we build our house on. Marriage didn't go too well, and the Thai wife says, well, that land is mine. But I said, I paid for it. What's the situation?
Yeah, it's hers. Or if it's a partner, it's his. This is a real misconception, and it goes deep. So give me a minute here. What we're talking, first of all, Thailand restricts land rights to non-Thai, like foreign nationals cannot own real estate in Thailand. They cannot own land.
Full stop.
So just starting there. Okay, there are some slight exceptions to that under certain very specific instances, but we won't get into that. For purposes of this video, you cannot own land as a foreigner. So you get married, you're married, and you give the money to your Thai spouse, and she buys, in this case we'll say it's a man, and she buys the house. Okay, the reason, and the calls that I get on this, they usually won't say, oh, I want the land or anything. They'll say, okay, well, in the event of the divorce, I just want half of what, I'm due and owed. Okay? Well,
bad news.
Yeah, bad news. That's probably not going to happen. Again, cases vary. There are certain instances where these things change. But for purposes of this video, the thing to understand, and really understand this deeply, because this is something that took me years to really grasp, even as a lawyer. In our system, in the common law system, or called Westminster law. So Australia, we may have slightly different laws than like America or the UK, but it all came from one spot. It's all from the UK. The common law system, we have this notion of equity in our legal system, okay? That does not exist in the Thai legal system, okay? And by equity, what I mean, and I don't want to get too deep, but when you go back, Henry VIII, he kicks out the Catholic Church, takes over, he becomes head of the Church of England. They had these church courts, ecclesiastical courts. And these came in, and they came under what was called, at the time, the Court of Chancery, or the Court of the King's Conscience. So you used to have the law courts, and then you had the Court of Chancery. If you could not get a remedy at law, you would go over and get a remedy under equity. And equity is just sort of fairness. You'd get a fair remedy.
Right.
So you had remedies at law and remedies in equity. Eventually, these were all kind of intertwined. And in most states in America, and any place in the Commonwealth, and the Anglosphere, if you will, it's all kind of intertwined. So like my dad back home is a judge, and when he operates, he uses his powers under law and equity. So sometimes the law, it won't quite do what you need it to do. So out of fairness, they'll exercise their powers under equity and just kind of make that right, tip the scales so it's fair. Thailand has none of this. There is no notion of equity in the Thai jurisprudence, in the Thai mindset. It's purely driven by legalistic principles. And this is why, again, foreigners are precluded from owning land in Thailand. You'll end up signing a document if you're married to a Thai when that Thai person buys land that essentially disclaims any ownership rights in it anyway. But on top of that, under a notion of equity, you'd say, well, he paid in, he should get something out of it. Nothing says that in law.
Right.
In law, this person, they have title, and they have clear title. That's it. That's where it stands. Now, I'm being very cut and dried about some very, what can it sometimes be, some very nebulous topics.
What about if you sign a document saying you're going to go half and half? Is that document going to be legal?
That would depend on circumstances. For example, a prenuptial agreement, which is possible in Thailand, might be able to deal with some of those issues, or where you can't gain the remedy you want there, you can offset it in some other part of the marital estate, if you will. So there are ways to deal with some things like that. But the point I want to get across, the misconception that a lot of Westerners have, and this is something I can't tell you how deep this goes in our thinking, especially in the Commonwealth, the Anglosphere, because it's just part of the way we do things. And to not have it there, we really don't notice it day to day, but it will come up every now and again. And when it does, you really feel it because you're left out in the cold, so to speak.
Okay, so if I'm in America, again, this is watching way too many films. You get arrested and they've got you on the ground with putting the handcuffs on. They go, you got the right to an attorney, ... Do I have the right to an attorney in Thailand?
You do, and this is the way it's been explained to me by Thai lawyers. Let me be clear. I'm not a Thai attorney. I'm a Thai citizen. I'm an American attorney. But I work with Thai attorneys. I'm the managing director of our firm. And they have explained it to me thusly. You have the right to an attorney if you are accused. If you've been arrested or accused of a crime, yes, you certainly have a right to counsel at that point. But here's kind of the kicker. In a lot of these situations, the police often begin by engaging in a fact-finding or investigative function to figure out what's going on. You don't necessarily have a right to a lawyer if they're investigating, if they're operating in an inquisitorial manner. You may not necessarily have a right to an attorney. There's a relatively good movie that kind of pointed this out. I don't love every aspect of this film. It's got some real misconceptions about Thailand.
Flashdance?
No, yeah, Flashdance. It's a good one. No, Broke Down Palace. There's a scene in the movie Broke Down Palace where there's been some questions being asked, and it's in the investigative function, and that is a very different thing from if you're being accused of something. So understand, in the United States, for example, if you're interacting with the government in any way, you always have the right to counsel. It's just the way it is. In Thailand, maybe not. If it's purely an inquisitorial or an inquiry being performed, even by the police, you may not have a right to any kind of lawyer. That being said, if you don't speak Thai, you may have at least the privilege of having an interpreter. Not a terrible idea if your lawyer happens to speak English so that you could have them function as both.
Now, can I just throw another curly one in there?
Sure.
Because sometimes a foreigner may be involved in a simple road accident. No one's been massively hurt or anything, but there's some messed up bikes and maybe some minor injuries. And I've been involved in 2 of these in my 11 years. In both cases, I wasn't harmed, but bikes have been harmed and somebody has incurred some minor injuries. And I found in both those cases, the police came along and they sorted out, they were lawyers, judge and jury. They were the whole thing. They came, they said, you paid this, and you, at that point, you just go, this is going to actually cost me 10,000 baht, whatever it is, and I'm going to walk away from this and I won't have to go and speak to lawyers or anything. If you decide in those cases where the police have acted to sort it all out on the spot, and you then want to challenge, I want to go to the police station, you are generally going to come off second best. But this is a situation whereby you just need to keep a very cool head in these situations.
Yeah, well, yes.
And you're probably better, if you're like a tourist, to get maybe your consulate to come down with a representative, or at least somebody who speaks or can translate for you. But don't get upset. Don't start saying, I demand an attorney, I demand. It's not going to wash well.
Yeah, a friend of mine worked for the U.S. State Department and was in, not here, but was in another country in South America. And he told me about a situation where somebody came in and was banging on the desk about, I demand my rights and da-da-da. And he said, and what rights are those? That you're not in America. So, I think that's a good rule of thumb. Presume you don't have any rights, quite frankly. And the other thing to understand, the role of the police in Thailand is a slightly different thing to the common law notion of a constable or a sheriff. They have, it's a little bit more like sort of the French prefect model, where they are the fact finder. And you will see this in the court proceedings here, that the courts are now you're going to be given your chance to give your side of the story, so to speak. But the courts are going to defer heavily on those police officers, as those are the sworn officers of Thailand whose job it is to make those fact-finding determinations. And quite frankly, at a street level, especially in a traffic context, I don't think you're ever going to see a court that's going to want to go out of its way to overturn what the quote-unquote guys on the ground came up with. If they came up with a solution, might as well just deal with that and move on. You know?
And the fact that they're wearing skin-tight brown outfits does in no way diminish the work that they do.
Sure, that's definitely true.
Okay, so I have committed a crime, and I'm thinking, oh, that's okay. I'm going to have my time in court, and there's going to be 12 people who have been chosen to come and decide, and I'll be able to smile and convince them that I'm innocent. So yeah, how's my time in front of the jury going to go here in Thailand?
Well, it's not going to go anywhere because there's not going to be a jury. A jury is a common law creation. It's a common law function.
No juries in Thailand?
No. There are judges are how things are done here. They are the ones that adjudicate. Oftentimes they'll often act in panels. I've been involved in situations where there was a 3-judge panel that made a determination as to the final outcome in a given adjudication. But yeah, no juries. Another big one to bear in mind, and again, a common law feature that is not here, and this kind of fits in with equity. There's no precedent. There's no stare decisis. Stare decisis means, it's a Latin term, it means let the decision stand.
So in other words, if something's happened before, and you say, well, my neighbour did this, they're going to say, well, that doesn't matter.
I'll even go further with you. I remember there was a case one of the attorneys in our firm was dealing with, and on the other side of the matter, I don't want to get too detailed, but on the other side of the matter was a foreigner, is a foreign national, English speaker, I think Canadian, and
only barely an English speaker then.
And this person basically, they were citing all this case law. They came into the court and I don't know where they had found this stuff, but they found it on the internet. The judge started getting angry, visibly angry.
Yeah.
He said, I don't care what other courts have said. I'm dealing with this case.
Yeah.
And again, much like this equity concept, this notion of not having precedent, and let's be clear, Supreme Court decisions, those are viewed very heavily. Those are viewed with a great deal of respect. The gravitas behind a Supreme Court decision here has enough weight that you could argue it rises to the level of precedent. But again, if you can distinguish it, if the facts in your situation are even slightly different, you may have a different outcome in your court. But the big issue to remember, that whole concept just does not exist in their jurisprudence or in their paradigm. In the Thai paradigm, this notion of precedent just doesn't exist. I'll tell you, the first few years I was here, this was something I really thought was a detriment in the Thai legal system. And having been here now as long as I have, I now kind of look at it from the other way. Why does some 400-year-old case from Blackstone in UK, Hadley versus Baxendale for contract law, why is that still controlling 450 years? I mean, it does seem a little arbitrary in its own way. So again, all of this stuff, really weird assumptions not weird, but commonsensical assumptions Westerners make, but the Thai legal system is just different. It's very, very different.
So 2 things, as we said in another program, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Right.
And secondly, do your very, very best not to end up in a Thai court.
Yes.
And never even need to engage the services of Ben Hart to get you out. Get him for something that's going to make you money, or
visa, business,
or a will or something.
Yeah.
But you just don't. 11 years of writing news about people who have ended up in the Thai court system. It often doesn't go the way they expect.
No, and that is probably sums up the foreigners' experience in the Thai court system. Not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just not what they expect.
It's different.
It's different. It's very, very different.
So we'll leave it there. But Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's Ben Hart there from Integrity Legal. We've got links to Integrity Legal in the description. And there's a whole lot of Lawyers, Guns and Money's programs that you can go through. A lot of the times not specifically answering some of the issues, because often there are very individual circumstances that we can't possibly address all of them. But from all of us here at the Thaiger and Ben, thanks for watching.